Nathan.
Katy and Queen's podcast supporters, we're back for Elizabeth Taylor Part 2.
Nathan, where did we leave her?
Well, we left her when she was 19 years old and just coming off of a horrible marriage with Icky Nicky Hilton. But silver lining, she's now a grown-up with her own money and her own choices, which also means she's choosing more grown-up roles in movies now.
She's coming into her own as an actress.
Yes.
In 1951, she made a movie called Ivanhoe, which is like this historical epic drama. And while filming this movie, she acted alongside a guy named Michael Wilding. And he would become Mr. Elizabeth Taylor, too.
We're not going to spend too much time on Michael Wilding. We got a lot of husbands to cover. And the only reason this marriage is important in this story is because he gave her 2 beautiful sons. Also, 2 beautiful, gorgeous engagement rings dripping in jewels a la Guanza.
It was just one engagement ring, but it was big enough to be 2. So I couldn't find a picture of it in color.
You could knock somebody out with that.
That is a weapon.
Yeah.
How do you pick your hand up?
If she backhanded somebody, she might give them a concussion.
Jesus! Yeah. So that's gorgeous.
So she married Michael Wilding when she was 20 years old, and he was 40.
Don't love it.
Ew. It doesn't seem like there was any major issue that caused the end of their marriage. Her star's just on the rise. His star is not. They had what Elizabeth described as a quote-unquote friendly divorce, so it was not messy.
Yeah, it seeed to be civil. It doesn't seem like anybody cheated on anybody when they decided to break up.
Not any foreshadowing in what Katy just said.
No, This is the only non-drama when it comes to divorces in this story. She kind of had this same issue with her first husband. He hated being called Mr. Elizabeth Taylor. And I think Michael Wilding really struggled with watching his wife have success after success while his own career was kind of starting to stall.
Ye old jealous husband, essentially.
She needs a husband that's not going to be intimidated by her success.
On her same level, or somebody who's not going to be intimidated by a woman who's going to just do that.
Yeah, totally. Well, then, you know what? You shouldn't have married Elizabeth Taylor. If you're intimidated by a powerful woman that's always going to be the center of attention, you shouldn't have married Elizabeth Taylor.
But don't worry, guys. Not all of her marriages and divorces are going to be so low drama.
Yeah.
Hang tight. Hang on to your tits. Because we're going to get back to her career before we talk into men.
Hang on to your tits? Is that a saying? Or is that
just... it is now.
It is now. Hang on to your tits, bitches. In 1956, Elizabeth Taylor starred in this movie called Giant. Have you ever seen this movie, or do you know about this movie, Nathan?
I know about it. I've never seen it because it's so long.
It's so long. It is 3.5 hours long. But it was really, really important to Elizabeth Taylor's career.
Yeah, and it also dealt with some hot topic issues at the time. Hot button issues like racism, segregation, the patriarchy. We are here for it. Things that Elizabeth had never given too much thought about before, but now was faced with having to think about these injustices in America. This movie was huge, and it was a huge success, both critically and at the box office, and won the Academy Award for Best Director that year.
It was also an important movie for her personal life because she made 2 new friends. So, Rock Hudson.
Oh. Nathan might have a crush.
We talked about it in the first episode with how she formed this lifelong friendship with Montgomery Clift, who was a closeted gay man, because it's the 50s in Hollywood. If you wanted to be an actor, you're not going to be out there being like, I like men, that's just not happening.
Not going to work.
And Rock Hudson, he was a closeted gay man. I just love that gay men all felt so comfortable with her. She became really good friends with Rock Hudson, and that friendship would last years and years and years. And she also became really good friends with the other male lead, James Dean.
And James Dean and Rock Hudson hated each other. And Elizabeth took it upon herself to keep the peace on set between the two men who... They both adored her. So she's like, you have one thing in common, and that's me.
Yeah, but sadly, James Dean died before the movie was finished filming. He got in a really bad car accident, and he died on the scene.
Yeah, and Elizabeth's world is turned upside down.
I mean, have we really talked about anybody else in her life that she lost like that before?
No, like randomly.
Because she's only like 22 or 23.
Yeah, know? But they still have a movie to film. And at this point...
Can you imagine?
I mean, this has happened before. The Crow was another one that it happened in where...
Somebody died and they still had to finish the movie.
Yeah. So it's emotionally taxing because you shared these moments and these scenes with somebody, and now you're going to the set and waiting for them to show up, and they don't.
If you died tomorrow... I don't think I would ever be able to record an episode of a podcast again.
I don't know how I feel about this because I don't want to die tomorrow.
Well, no. God, no. If you in any way took that to mean I hope I never record a podcast. I know. I'm just saying, I couldn't imagine like a week later having to return to the place where you made that friend and just all the memories and everything.
Yeah, and much less after you're done recording. There's like this thing that you do in Hollywood. It's like the wrap party.
And then go on like a press tour for it and have a grand opening.
And of course on the press tour, they're all like, so tell me about James Dean. And you're like, oh, God, I don't want to talk about that.
Elizabeth Taylor did an interview in like the 80s or 90s. And she told the interviewer, you cannot print this until after I die. And the reporter honored that and didn't print it until after she died. But James Dean had admitted to Elizabeth Taylor that when he was a child, his pastor at his church molested him. So, like, that's how close they were. You don't just tell anybody that shit. You know, like, that's how close they were.
Especially back then. Like, that's not something you share.
What a tragedy. He died. He was so young.
Yeah. That was only the good die young. One of them.
All right, Billy Joel.
Despite the loss of one of its stars, this movie was a huge hit and a boost to Elizabeth's career. And as for her personal life, there was a man that had her on his mind.
Mike Todd has entered the chat.
Ooh.
So Nathan, introduce Mike Todd to the listeners of Queen's Podcast.
Mike Todd was a famous producer who was riding high off of his recent mega success around the movie Around the World in 80 Days. Mike Todd was an incredibly ambitious and sometimes successful businessman. He had met Elizabeth while he was still with her second husband, and he'd been in love with her since the first time he saw her.
I want to circle back to that sometimes successful thing, because this man had so many ups, so many downs, so many ups, so many downs, but he always kind of landed on top. I saw this one quote by him that I loved. I haven't always been rich, but I've never been poor. I've been broke, but broke is temporary. Poor is a state of mind. And if you have a poor state of mind, you're never going to not be broke. I just thought that was important to just give you some kind of context on this guy's character. He is not a guy that gets knocked down easily. And so when he saw Elizabeth Taylor, he was like, oh, that woman is going to be my wife.
Yeah, so one day Elizabeth is at MGM Studios and she gets a note that the producer, Mike Todd, would like to have a meeting with her. And she's thinking, he must have a movie that he wants me to be in. So imagine her surprise that when she walks into his office, he starts telling her all the reasons that she should marry him.
Okay, whatever that was, it worked on Elizabeth. I think she's attracted to confidence.
Yes.
And this guy had big dick energy. This guy was only 5'5". So don't come at me being like, women don't like short men. No, women don't like guys that exude unconfident. Be confident is what I'm saying. He had swagger. He had big clit energy. He had big dick energy.
He had both.
No, she's like, whatever this confidence is, I am fucking into it. She knew he wasn't going to be fazed by somebody calling him Mr. Elizabeth Taylor. He was going to be like, fuck yeah, I am. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a compliment. Thank you. Elizabeth would later say, my self-esteem, my image, everything soared under his exuberant loving care. And though this would be her third husband, it seems like it was the first time that she was truly in love.
Right. With Icky Nicky, it kind of seemed like the studio wanted her to be married. Then her second marriage, Elizabeth Taylor will later say, admit in life that she only slept with men she married. So I think it was just kind of like her second one was like, well, we've slept together.
Might as well get married.
Married.
Mike and Elizabeth had a whirlwind romance that could be a little tumultuous. When they fought. But when they made up, aka Bone Zone. Some people just like that kind of relationship. I feel like that kind of relationship borders on toxic, though.
Yes. They like the challenge. They like the drama. I don't know. But Elizabeth wound up pregnant pretty quick after meeting Mike. She wanted more children. So it was around this time, after she found out she was pregnant, that Mike Todd proposed to her with another ginormous engagement ring. So this is her after she has their baby on the cover of Life magazine. Look at that ring.
Good Lord. That is as big as the baby's nose.
She called it her ice skating rink.
You could do a triple axel on that thing. The two married in a lavish ceremony in Mexico, and Mike's best friend, Eddie Fisher, was the best man. His wife, Debbie Reynolds, was her matron of honor, so just tuck those names in your back pocket.
Just fun fact, in case you didn't know, and you are a Star Wars fan, Eddie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds are the parents of Carrie Fisher, Princess Leia. Elizabeth is considering her life at this point. She has been working since she was 9 years old.
Oof.
She is now 25. She has been in 27 movies. That is more than one movie for every year of her life. She's tired.
Yeah.
She tells Mike, I don't think I want to work anymore. I want to stay at home and be a homemaker.
Whatever Elizabeth wants, Elizabeth gets. Mike.
Yep.
Probably.
Yeah.
They go to MGM and they start negotiating an end to her contract. Now, one thing you need to know about Mike Todd is that he was a master negotiator and a very, very savvy businessman.
Yes. They come to an agreement. Elizabeth has one movie she's already signed up for, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. Her contract was for 3 more years, but they negotiate it down to, and after Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, she will do 1 more movie in the 3 years that you have her. So that sounds reasonable, you know? Yeah. Then she would finally be free, and she was going to retire or at least take a nice long break and just be a stay-at-home mom, because she has been with MGM since she was 11.
Yeah, that's more than more than her life.
More than half, absolutely, yeah.
6 months after their Mexico wedding, Elizabeth Taylor went into labor with her daughter and little girl that they named Liza. But the delivery was not that great. It was very hard on not only the baby, but Elizabeth as well. Baby almost nearly died.
Elizabeth was given an emergency C-section. When Liza was born, they actually pronounced her stillborn. But luckily, one of the nurses was like, let's just try to resuscitate and see what happens. And they revived her. So,
thank God.
That's scary. And I mean, Elizabeth Taylor was knocked out. It was not one of those C-sections where you stay awake. So she didn't know that her baby was pronounced stillborn at birth. Thank God.
Yeah. And really frustrating side note that kind of factors into her being unconscious was she was under anesthesia, and one of the doctors told Mike, if Elizabeth has another baby, if she gets pregnant again, she could die. So we need to tie her tubes. And Mike ends up agreeing to it. Ugh.
So I hate that happened, but I don't think we should give Mike Todd too much shit for that, because that's how things went then. And he was probably crawling out of his skin with anxiety.
Yeah.
And so if the doctor comes to him and is like, this is my medical opinion, I'm sure he was just like, yep, whatever is going to keep her safe.
But when Elizabeth came to and they told her what had been done, she was heartbroken because she wanted to have loads and loads of Taylor Todd babies. Yeah. So it sucks that back in the 50s, they didn't have to ask a woman what they wanted for her own health. Her husband could just make that decision for her.
That is bananas. I am so... Burners. Elizabeth is living her best, happiest life after the birth of Liza, after the recovery. She is just feeling so grateful, so happy to have this beautiful life. She had 3 beautiful children. She had an ex that she was on good terms with, so it's not like her kids from her first marriage were like living fatherless. Like, and now she's got this new beautiful baby. She has a husband that showered her with gifts. They were married on a Saturday, so every Saturday he gave her a gift.
Everything is coming up roses for Elizabeth.
Yes.
Until it wasn't. And this is when shit goes absolutely wild in Elizabeth's life.
1958, she has a 7-month-old. Liza's 7 months old. Mike Todd is going on this trip. But she had bronchitis and 102-degree fever. So it kind of feels like, okay, foreshadowing, but maybe fate played a part here.
Maybe.
No, bitch, you are staying home.
Yeah. So Todd came to hug her before he got on his private plane, which he named the Lucky Liz. Irony. He told Elizabeth that he'd call her in a few hours when he would stop in Utah.
To refuel the plane.
Yeah.
The next day, Elizabeth wakes up and she's like, oh, maybe Mike called while I was sleeping. And she goes to ask the housekeeper, like, do we have a message from Mike? No? Wait, why? What? The vibes are off in here. And you know she's a Pisces, so you know she can tell when the vibes are off, like, immediately. Why does everybody look so bummed? Why isn't anybody talking to me? What is happening? So where is Mike?
And soon after, Elizabeth's doctor came over and broke the news to her. Mike's plane had gone down. There were no survivors.
Elizabeth was hysterical.
Can you blame her?
Absolutely not.
You just lost your husband in a plane crash.
In a most unexpected way. A plane you were supposed to be on.
Oh, survivor's guilt.
And you have a 7-month-old baby.
Oh my gosh. Boo.
Oh my God. Her doctor was worried because, she's already not in good health. 102 fever, that's high. So he's like, you are going to make yourself even sicker. And she's like, I don't fucking care. The doctor was also like, I don't think it's great for your kids to see you like this. Who can we call to come and take them away? They called Debbie Reynolds, being like, can you come over and take the kids away, please?
So she comes over, picks up Elizabeth's 3 kids, and brought them to her house. And her husband, Eddie Fisher, was already in New York. Eddie Fisher just adored Mike Todd and was maybe the only person that loved him as much as Elizabeth did.
It was like a mentor-mentee kind of situation. If you don't know where the story is going with Elizabeth Taylor, Debbie Reynolds, and Eddie Fisher, we really should tell you something, just a little bit of preface on Debbie Reynolds and Eddie Fisher's marriage. So they married young, and they were like America's sweethearts. There's been a lot of chatter since the 50s if theirs was a relationship that was kind of constructed by the movie studios because their images were so similar. She was this blonde, she was the girl from Singing in the Rain, you know? She's this beautiful blonde who very much has that all-American wholesome image that was so important in the 1950s. And Eddie Fisher was a singer who also had a very similar kind of image. They had actually discussed divorcing a couple of times. They weren't actually a happily married couple.
Yeah, they had been on and off again for a while. They had just had a baby, but ultimately they didn't, because it would have affected their careers, which...
Their images, to be America's sweetheart couple, divorced in the 50s.
Okay, let's just not get divorced because everybody doesn't want us to. Ugh. So keep that all in mind, but let's jump back to Elizabeth.
Our girl is having a bad time. She
it's a bad day.
Wrecked. And I mean, yes, yes, of course she's wrecked. She loved Mike Todd so much. At the end of her life, when somebody asked who was the love of your life, she still said Mike Todd.
Yeah.
And she had a lot of other husbands, spoiler alert. And now the world is watching you mourn.
Shirley MacLaine and Elizabeth were bestest of friends. Shirley would later talk about sitting with Elizabeth at her house in the days after Mike's death. She said Elizabeth ended up just sitting on the couch, crying, smoking cigarettes, drinking vodka. And look, if it was me, same.
I imagine if Steve died tomorrow, I imagine you'd be over here and we'd just be smoking weed and drinking vodka. Well,
yeah.
People don't really smoke cigarettes anymore is the difference.
Yeah, it would not be a good time for you.
It would be the exact same. So, like, no,
you know
is that the healthiest way to cope?
No, and we'll get you through it.
But who are we to judge?
We will get you through it no matter which way you choose. I don't care.
Yeah. Okay, talking about Mike Todd's funeral, actually, like, researching this got me so upset because I kept putting myself in her position, and it's infuriating. So they decided to have his funeral in Chicago, because that's where he's from originally, and it was a media circus. She later wrote, people brought picnic baskets because they were camping out all day to get a good spot to see the famous Elizabeth Taylor mourn, the world's most famous widow. Could you imagine going to bury a loved one and seeing people making a day of it? How mad would you be?
I would be sick. And
That is so fucked up.
I would probably, if I was in a car, I'd roll down my window and start screaming at them. And then there would be like photos of Nathan's gone wild. He lost his shit at everybody. It's like, yeah, because y'all are making a spectacle out of this, not me.
I would go full-blown Britney Spears 2007 with the bald head and the umbrella.
I could see you doing that. I don't put it past you.
There's this story of her, like, in her car. The driver can't drive away because of the crowds.
Ugh.
This is the late 50s, a time that my own grandmother, the late 50s, early 60s, talked a lot about how they just prescribed women, she called them tranquilizers, like left, right, and center. The Rolling Stones have a song called Mother's Little Helper about the same thing. No facts, just vibes. I have to assume she is pilled up to her eyeballs. But wouldn't you want to be too? That's how you don't go full-blown Britney Spears 2007.
Yeah. I couldn't imagine being put in the spotlight after suffering trauma like that.
You're trying to bury your husband.
Yeah, you just honestly want to go home and drink vodka and sleep, but everybody's going to talk about it.
Wildly enough, this funeral happens. Her husband, the love of her life, the father of her very, very young child, is dead in such a dramatic way. But MGM is like looking at their watch and they're like, time is money, Liz. I'm sorry. Like, they were halfway through filming Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and they're like, sorry, babe, you got to get back in the studio. And Elizabeth is like, how do you expect me to show up on set and play this really, really difficult character in this state? And they're like, yep, that is exactly what.
Poor thing. Here's a direct quote from Elizabeth, because this is not a good time. Mike's barely cold in his grave, and all they're worried about is their goddamn movie.
Yeah.
Ugh. Can you give me like a month or two?
Right.
to breathe after this.
Can y'all recast this movie?
After all, she had just seen James Dean die in one of his movies, and now her husband dies before another one. It's like, hey, trauma.
But, yes. Oh my God. But it turns out, so Mike, like we said, he was a gambler in both his profession and in actual gambling. So he left Elizabeth with a shit ton of debt.
Oh, I was hoping you were going to say a shitload of money. But she went the other way because he's a gambler. Okay.
He did, the only thing that he really left her with that she would make money off of is one, her ice skating rink. She sold it. We don't know for sure. We don't know for sure that she sold it right after he died, her engagement ring. But when they auctioned off all her possessions in 2011, that ring was not in the collection.
Oh, so somebody's wondering, not wandering around. They know they have her ring.
Yes,
They're just being like super secretive about it.
She probably sold it after this when she realized how much debt she had. The only other thing is she has, and if you Google the phrase Todd AO, you'll probably recognize the logo. He had copywritten or patented this type of way that you do widescreen filmography, and she inherited that. So eventually she would earn money off of that.
At the time, she was not making any money, so she had to get back to work.
Yes.
She would actually say later in life that this was a blessing in disguise. When she was in character, she actually got to escape reality and kind of get an outlet for her grief.
It was an avenue for her grief.
Yes.
Besides sitting on the couch and drinking vodka and smoking cigarettes. And Maggie in Cat in a Hot Tin Roof is a dramatic character. Mm-hmm. So she got to she had an avenue to let out that grief, which, blessing in disguise. Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Then weeks after Mike's death, she was really having to lean on her best friend, Eddie Fisher. Mm-hmm. And, well, one thing led to another, and eventually they're having an affair.
She was leaning on that dick.
Katy, why were you made this way? I love you.
Why am I like this? That dick.
I love
that
it.
Dick. She's leaning on that dick. That dick. That dick. She's leaning on that dick. Debbie Reynolds hears rumors about her leaning on that dick. Because, like, people were whispering that they are spending a lot of time together. The thing is, though, Debbie Reynolds told Eddie Fisher to go spend time with Elizabeth Taylor. So at first, she was like, oh, no, y'all got this twisted. Debbie Reynolds was like, y'all are the only people that understand what y'all are both going through right now. Go spend time with her while she's doing this movie. So she basically was like, unknowingly sent her husband into the arms of another woman. Yeah.
And they bumped butts. Is that what straight people do?
You just hit your butts together and that's how you have sex. Yep.
Okay, that's how babies are made. Yay.
And that's how babies are made.
So Debbie,
she's hearing rumors. She's hearing rumors.
She's hearing more than rumors. Imagine how she felt, though, whenever she calls over to Elizabeth Taylor's hotel and Eddie Fisher answers the phone.
What she tells people that she says. I don't know if it's true, because I feel like I would make up what I tell people I said in that situation. But supposedly, when Eddie answered the phone, she goes, darling, if you could roll over in bed and hand the phone to Elizabeth, that would be great. Do people actually think of lines that good in the moment?
No,
or
they
is
don't.
I don't know.
Unless they knew that it was happening. If
she had time to plan, like, if he answers the phone, this is what I'm going to say.
Because she knew that something was going on. But after that, like, Debbie played her shit really smart at this point.
She really did.
She ran to the studio and was like, hey, Eddie is leaving me for Elizabeth. How do you want me to play this?
How do you want?
And the studio was like, okay, you're going to play the brokenhearted, busy mom, and you're going to be it's going to be a struggle bus, but it's okay because everybody's going to sympathize with you because everybody understands the woe of being a single mother after your man left you for another woman. I mean, come on.
For the most beautiful woman in the world.
Yes, it's Elizabeth Taylor.
Yes.
You know, we can handle her. We'll just make her the...
spin this.
We're going to make her the biggest villain ever.
Yes. Debbie Reynolds is the angel that everyone is crying for. And now Elizabeth Taylor is that slut that stole her best friend's man. And then get into some drama. Slut shaming!
We're not going to get into the weeds about Elizabeth Taylor and Eddie Fisher and that whole affair because that is a whole nother episode. But for a modern reference, if you lived through Brad Pitt, Jennifer Aniston, and the whole Mr. and Mrs. Smith meeting Angelina Jolie drama, this was that on steroids.
We have so much to discuss, so we're going to have to move on from this drama. But Elizabeth Taylor was painted as a whore, as a homewrecker. Eddie was called even worse for breaking the heart of America's sweetheart. People were protesting Eddie Fisher's concerts. At least I don't remember people picketing Brad and Angelina's appearances. This was next level media circus.
And Elizabeth really didn't help things out. If she would have been related to somebody in Queen's podcast history, that would be Anne Boleyn, because she had a big sexy mouth.
Oh, her big sexy mouth got her in trouble. Nathan, tell us about this quote.
So Hedda Hopper, huge gossip columnist, when she reached out to Elizabeth for a quote, Elizabeth said, "Well, Mike is dead and I'm alive. What am I supposed to do? Sleep alone?"
This quote it set the world on fire with scandal because it indicated that she's already having sex with this married man. Which, I mean, yeah.
They were. Yeah.
But this is a time, you just have to remember how much more conservative the public was in the late 50s, early 60s. Elizabeth Taylor never had one, but a lot of celebrities, a lot of actors and musicians had morality clauses. And so this is scandalous, saying, what am I supposed to do? Sleep alone? She may as well said, we blow each other in the car on the way to this interview. You know, like, it was...
How does one blow a woman? We'll find out.
Well, how does one blow a man? There's not actually blowing involved. It just means going down on.
Touche. Katy has won that argument.
What we're getting at, wildly, wildly scandalous thing for her to say to someone that she knew was going to print her words. And sexy mouth.
The funny thing about Elizabeth Taylor is that when she has sex with someone, that means... You're getting married. Like,
gotta marry him.
It's like a lesbian. Like, oh, I'm moving in. In 1959, Elizabeth took her 4th trip down the aisle, just hours after Eddie's divorce from Debbie. Like, it wasn't even, the ink was still drying.
These two just didn't do themselves favors in the media with, like, one, her with their quote of what am I supposed to do, sleep alone. And two, like with them getting married the same day that his divorce was final. Like, let it sit for a second. But no. Funnily enough, though, of all her wedding dresses, her dress that she wore when she married Eddie Fisher is my favorite.
She looks like she's a forest nymph. Like,
yes,
coming out of the woods.
She does.
Like, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yes. So this scandal, there were 3 people involved in this scandal. Elizabeth Taylor, Debbie Reynolds, Eddie Fisher. Elizabeth Taylor and Debbie Reynolds went on to have successful careers. Eddie Fisher, on the other hand, this ruined his career.
Well, I mean, he's
the one to be fault. He's the one to fault.
This, I was about to say, honestly, in culture, we tend to start screaming at the women for being sluts and whores, and it's like, actually, he's the one that made the decision. So let's ruin his career.
Elizabeth Taylor and Debbie Reynolds made up eventually.
Yeah. So that tells you all you need to know.
And they have both said the same thing in interviews way later, is you can't steal somebody. You can't take somebody from a happy marriage. I don't think Debbie Reynolds was necessarily blindsided because they weren't in love. You can't take somebody from something if they don't want to be taken. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
No, that makes complete sense.
So, but anyway, his career tanked after this scandal.
Elizabeth,
on the other hand,
MGM had her on contract for one more movie. And they were like, okay, we got to capitalize on this. How can we do this? So they cast her as Gloria, a high-dollar escort in a movie called Butterfield 8.
And she was pissed. She's like, you want me to play a sex worker? And
they're like, well, I mean, you just stole this husband. Like, so she had this image in the public eye already, and they were capitalizing on that.
As Slutty McSlutface. And it's also probably a little bit of punishment for, one, her leaving. Like, this is the last movie she's going to make with MGM. And you know what we're going to do? And you just trashed your public image. So we're leaning in, bitch. We are leaning all the way in. Yes, you are going to play a sex worker.
Yeah, MGM was trying to be like, hey, we're going to capitalize off of your image right now. Yeah. But Elizabeth Taylor did win an Academy Award for this role. So it was a smart move. But
she was like, anybody that would listen, she told everybody how pissed off.
Yeah.
But bitch, you got an Oscar. Shut up.
And the time after Butterfield 8 was a huge turning point for Elizabeth. First of all, she's free of MGM.
Now, every movie studio in the world is like, Elizabeth Taylor is a free agent. I got to get her in this movie. But Elizabeth, she's going to play some hard to get. She is going to say, actually, I'm retiring, which only makes people want her more and more, and only makes people want to pay her more and more. She's smart. This woman is smart.
Maybe learned it from Mike Todd.
Right.
But on the flip side of her life, she realizes that she made a big old mistake marrying Eddie Fisher.
Cue Arrested Development music. I mean, huge mistake. Yes.
She would later say that she thought she was in love with Eddie because they talked about Mike Todd so much.
She felt if they talked about him every day, it kept him alive. After a couple of years, Elizabeth was like, oh no, I don't love this man. And she started taking sleeping pills so that she could limit the time she had to be with him.
Ooh, she was probably already hooked on said sleeping pills for
but that's what we call in the medical profession a big yikes. Like
professional opinion.
Professionally speaking, that's not great.
Yeah, let's pivot from that because it's time to talk about one of Queen's podcast's most favorite topics in the world, Cleopatra.
Coming at you. Yes.
Fox had been waiting and waiting and waiting for Elizabeth to be out on her own, and she's off of that contract so she could play Cleopatra in this epic film that they were about to make.
And Elizabeth Taylor keeps telling them, no, please go away. And the way that Elizabeth Taylor has always told this story, as much as I love her, is bullshit. I think this is a big old lie. But the way that she tells this story is that they just kept calling. And one day she's in the bathtub and they call. And Eddie Fisher is on the phone being like, Fox is on the phone again asking about this Cleopatra movie. She's like, I'm just going to throw the biggest number at them in the world to make them go away. Eddie, tell them I will do their Cleopatra movie for $1 million because it's just the most ridiculous number she could come up with in her head. And they said, you got it. And so it's called the Bathtub deal. And it is, at this point in history, the largest contract an actor has ever signed.
Yeah, because $1 million back then is way more money nowadays.
That's like $60 million now or something. Yeah.
Yeah, but cute story. But how true is it?
It's not.
No.
I think Elizabeth Taylor was a very calculated businesswoman at this point in her life.
She learned it from Mike Todd.
Yeah.
Did she just spout out some random number? No. It was a cold, calculated number where she knew, hey, I need to be the highest paid actress in history at this point because I'm coming out of retirement. And it's not just about salary. She didn't just negotiate $1 million for that one movie. Yeah. But they negotiate a percentage of the profits from the movie.
The gross profit, not the net profit.
Yes. So because essentially the idea is you're putting butts in the seats. Mm-hmm. And 10% of this audience is here to see me. So you need to give me 10% of the gross profit.
Which means I had to pay $10 to rent that movie on Amazon in 2024. So like 60 years after the movie was made or whatever. Her estate is still getting 10% of that.
$1. You know? She's getting $1. Yeah,
they're still getting 10% of that. It was so fucking smart. She knew what she was fucking worth.
Yeah.
It was unheard of. She was a trailblazer. And I think we can all learn from that. Know what you're fucking worth. Do not take that job if that's not the salary you want. Do not be in that relationship if they're not treating you right. Know your fucking worth. Thank you, Elizabeth Taylor.
Now, from beginning to end, everything about making this movie was drama. First, they decided to shoot the movie in England. One of the very first scenes Elizabeth shoots, she's completely naked, and they're mostly outside. And IDK, if you've been to England or not, but they have real shitty weather, and it's not a great idea.
The weather in England is not conducive for being naked outside. No. She was.
Yeah, and she catches a cold and then ends up developing pneumonia, and she almost dies.
Well, I mean, actually, she did die.
What?
She was pronounced dead. She had no vital signs for 5 minutes.
Oh.
They did an emergency tracheotomy, and she did pull through. And because this is how news travels, the newspapers went ahead and reported her death, and they printed her eulogy or whatever. And she did an Oprah interview in the 80s where she talks about it, and she goes, "It was the best reviews I ever got." That's so funny.
She didn't talk about it much later in life, but in the 80s, Elizabeth would claim that she had one of those light at the end of the tunnel experiences. She said she saw Mike Todd and that she wanted to go with him, but she claims he pushed her back and said, "No, your kids need you. We'll see each other soon enough, but your kids can't grow up without a mom."
And I thought this was really interesting because I feel like we grew up hearing stories about light at the end of the tunnel, blah, 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 blah. And so the story that she tells on Oprah kind of sounds like what you and I like. It almost sounds like a trope. But in the 80s, people weren't openly talking about this. You didn't have the internet to Google what near-death experiences sound like. Now, was this a hallucination? Was it real? And does that matter? Because it was real to her. You know what I mean? In her mind, this really happened.
Yeah. Anyway, after she recovered months later, they started filming again, and we don't have time to go into all that drama.
Making this movie was a clusterfuck.
Yeah, location issues, whole thing. Elizabeth almost caused a strike by bringing her own makeup artist in, and the director was replaced after the movie had already started filming.
The drama that this movie is famous for, it's not the strikes, it's not the locations, but the drama that your mama knows about this show is because she met the guy that played Mark Antony.
Oh.
Welsh actor Richard Burton. And yo, what did you say earlier? Hang on to your tits? Because this chemistry.
Yeah. Hold tight to your tits.
Hold on to your tits.
It's like the chemistry that happened between Mark Antony and Cleopatra.
Yeah, honestly, they were very well cast.
It was not love at first sight, though. Burton had a reputation. He said that he had slept with every leading lady that he'd ever acted with, except Julie Andrews. Thank you for saving her reputation.
Yes. So Elizabeth rocks onto this set being like, I am not going to be another notch in this guy's bedpost. He is not gonna touch me off the set. Absolutely not. So she brings that attitude to the set being like, this guy thinks he's so fucking hot. He thinks he's so fucking talented. Oh, let's not let him forget who is the actual star here. Thank you very much.
And Richard came in with a similar attitude. He wanted to bring her down off of her high horse. Oh, this is supposed to be the most beautiful woman in the world? Yeah, right.
So at first people were like, oh no, we are going to have a problem when they get to their scenes together. Because they actually don't have scenes together until 2.5 hours into this 4-hour movie.
Katy's mad about it.
When I rented the movie, I thought, oh, this is a 4-hour movie. This must be like a lot of like director's cut shit afterwards or something. No, it's just a 4-hour long movie. I hated this movie. I hated everything about this movie. Let's move on. Except for the costumes. Oh my god, I loved the costumes. Let's move on.
Elizabeth and Richard are not necessarily getting along at first.
It's not love at first sight.
Until their first kiss. And the director yelled cut, but the couple kept kissing. Supposedly the director said something like, sorry to interrupt, but can y'all stop making out? We need to have lunch.
We need to have lunch. Everyone needs to take a break now. We're shutting off the cameras. Oh, y'all are still kissing? Okay.
Were they married, Katy?
Yes, they were both married, yes.
Did that matter?
Nope. Hard nope. Eddie? Wait, Eddie. Eddie Farsh? I don't know him. He doesn't go here. These two started a super hot, steamy affair.
10 years after their relationship started, Elizabeth would say, when you're in love and lust like that, you just gotta grab it with both hands and ride it out in the storm.
Okay, girl. This affair actually is credited with starting paparazzi.
Oh.
Because they filmed a lot of it in Rome. And, you know, paparazzi is like an Italian phrase, an Italian word. And the Italian photojournalists were already known for being really aggressive.
So that's why Britney Spears shaved her head, is because of Elizabeth Taylor. Okay.
In a roundabout way, sure.
You heard it.
Yeah.
You heard it here first.
You heard it here first on Queen's podcast.
The Italian press caught pictures of them in their hotel rooms together, kissing, fighting, and the magazines and newspapers back home were paying a fuckload of money to get those pictures. And thus, the paparazzi was born.
And also, they had no plausible deniability. But also, they didn't want to deny it either because they were so obsessed with each other. And I honestly feel like Elizabeth Taylor was just so hungry to be in love again after Mike Todd died, and then she made this huge accident of marrying Eddie Fisher. Yeah. And this guy was her equal on everything. They could talk about acting together. He was like a stage actor. He was like an actor's actor, you know, and like they could talk about like tumultuous relationships together. They just were firing on all cylinders together. So they didn't want to deny it. They were like, oh, yep, this happened.
They were the real thing. They're so in love. And they also maybe kind of hated each other.
Yes. It was a tumultuous relationship for sure.
Yeah.
There. The affair changed the paparazzi. The affair made this movie a huge hit. The country had never been scandalized except for her last scandal. Yeah. So her last scandal was the biggest celebrity scandal America had ever seen. And now this was the next big scandal that America had ever seen.
She is the scandal.
She is. She is the moment.
Though there is one really funny line. Apparently, Eddie Fisher calls Elizabeth one day, and Richard answers the phone. And when Eddie says, what are you doing here? Richard supposedly said, what do you think? I'm fucking your wife. Oh, Debbie Reynolds. Debbie Reynolds is loving the karma of this situation.
Like we said at the top of the podcast, I promised the Pope was going to make an entrance in this episode, and here we are. The fucking Vatican published a newspaper article condemning Elizabeth Taylor's and Richard Burton's relationship. The Pope actually took time out of his day. Has there ever been a celebrity scandal in our lifetime that the Pope has chimed in on?
Like, he wrote, rise above the fray, bro. Rise above the fray.
The Pope wrote that Elizabeth Taylor should have her children taken away from her.
Whoa.
And Elizabeth Taylor did not give a single fuck.
Anyway, this movie made a ton of money. The affair was amazing PR for the movie. And people were lining up to see the affair on screen, which, remember, meant Elizabeth is making 10% of the gross income of the money coming in.
Yep. It took 2 years. But on March 5th, 1964, Elizabeth was granted a divorce from Eddie. And she wore yellow to her wedding with Richard Burton 10 days later, which is, again, giving Anne Boleyn. She wore yellow after Catherine of Aragon.
And I think this is where we're going to leave Elizabeth for now.
Yes.
Next time, we'll talk about life with and after Richard Burton, philanthropy, and her very, very important work with AIDS, and, of course, husbands and diamonds.
And diamonds. Cheers, bitches.
Cheers.